Basu Godin Notebook. 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 Hey everybody, welcome to the Basu and Godin Notebook on this November 28th, Friday edition. Arpin, you're out somewhere. You don't seem to be home.
I am not home. I'm in
No.
Mont Tremblant. My boy has a hockey tournament over this weekend. It's nicely timed with the Canadiens out of town and me not on the trip. So, I'll be watching some Pee Wee hockey.
That's good.
Marty will be feeling jealous out there in the Rockies.
Well, maybe there's a head coach position waiting for you in the NHL.
Yeah,
one
maybe.
day.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Maybe.
But don't forget to record this afternoon game and tomorrow's game too. So because those are afternoon games, exciting ones coming up against Vegas and Colorado. We got a lot of topics lined up for today. Later on, we're going to discuss Zachary Bolduc, possible emergence on the top line. Obviously, with Thanksgiving, and the fact that there seems to be some sellers that are showing up, that are popping up, especially in the Western Conference. We'll take a look at that and how it affects the Canadiens and what they can do about that. Maybe a word on David Reinbacher also. But first, if we take a look at the game that Canadiens played on Wednesday night in Utah, I think there's a couple of interesting takeaways from that game. The rookies' ice time in the third period being certainly one of them, right?
Yes, so we should set this up a little bit. So on Monday, at Canadiens practice in Brossard, I asked Marty, the game Wednesday was the start of a stretch of 16 games in 28 days, 5 back-to-backs in those 28 days. That was obviously the first one coming up tonight or this afternoon and tomorrow. But then again next week, and then each of the 3 weekends in December, the first 3 weekends in December, it's a back-to-back with travel. So, I was just like, how do you anticipate preparing for this schedule, and he's like, well, if you look at it like that, it can seem like a lot to bite off, and we're going to look at it, I'm going to look at this week and I'll get to manage it week to week. But,
even day by day,
and then he said, right now I'm just worried about Wednesday. Right. So the game Wednesday played out in a way that very much seemed like Marty was just worried about Wednesday. And I don't blame him. This is not a criticism at all. They needed to, they had that game, they gave it back, and then they took it back, and they had to close it out. So I understand. But it's not true that you're going to be able to play 16 games in 28 days if you're going with 3 forward lines and basically 3 defensemen. You can't do that night after night. It's just not going to work, especially, these 2 games coming up today and tomorrow. Today's game has to be managed in a way that you have something left for tomorrow, unless they just decide that tomorrow's like a schedule loss, which sometimes you have those on your schedule. And frankly, if you play an afternoon game in Vegas, then you got to fly to Denver, you're playing at altitude, you've had no time to acclimatize to the altitude. It's by far the best team in the NHL. Maybe you do just go, let's get the win in Vegas if we can. And if they do, that's a successful road trip, right there.
For sure.
It'll be, to me, I thought 3 points on the road trip, and that's a successful road trip. So, it's going to be interesting over the next little while to see what Marty does. For instance, yesterday they had an optional skate in Vegas. I don't know how many guys skated, but I was surprised to see that, because this is one of the things that you would think with the schedule coming up, practice time is going to be very hard to come by. It's going to be tough to squeeze practices in there when you're playing a game every less than 2 days. It's the cadence here is ridiculous. So, that third period usage.
Is that old cliche of rest as a weapon in a case like that? How many times
Yeah,
during 3 games in 4 nights a team will squeeze a practice in the middle of that, whether it's
it's almost never.
optional? No,
It's
almost
unheard
never.
of. It's unheard of, especially on the road, and especially under these circumstances, like the teams that they're about to play and the follow up. I mean, this you're talking about just a regular 3 game and 4 night
Yeah.
run. This is not a regular 3 game and 4 night run. This is a very difficult one. Followed by a back to back at home, followed by this, followed by that. Like, I mean, it's just like it's the start of a ridiculous run, and I don't feel like Marty was being fully forthright in his answer. Like he has to be thinking about this to some extent. There's no way he has such a short sighted view of the upcoming schedule. Uh, but on Wednesday, the limitations of his lineup were glaring, right? And I thought Adam Engstrom had a fine debut. Like, good for him for getting his debut. Unfortunately, the Canadiens didn't spell his name properly on his jersey, but
No umlaut, man.
no,
No.
it's not an umlaut. It's not apparently in Sweden. It's not an umlaut. The O with the 2 dots is its
Right.
own letter. It's
Okay.
its own letter in the alphabet. So when I wrote, remember I wrote that piece on accents a while ago with
Right.
Lafreniere, and
Yeah.
the comparison I made would be like if you were to spell the name Ryan Smith, if you were to spell Smith with an I, that's the equivalent of spelling Engstrom without the 2 dots over the O,
Okay.
because they're two separate letters in the alphabet. So anyhow, that's an aside. That's my own little thing that bothers me. Well, it should bother everyone, really. It's his name. You should spell it right. But he did not play a whole lot in the second half of the third period, especially like when the Canadiens got the lead. Martin St. Louis' bench management changed drastically. Joe Veleno did not play the first 8 minutes of that third period. Then they take that penalty. I believe it was Kapanen for puck over the glass. He kills that penalty. That's his first shift of the third period. And from that point on, he played every 2 minutes
Yeah.
for the rest of the third period. And was on the
Well,
ice at 6-on-5, taking the final face-off with 3 seconds left to ice the game because it was on the left side. And so there's definitely a we need a goal lineup and a we need to defend lineup. And so
you
I
remember
don't
the other day we had a discussion about Nick Suzuki's ice time, and Marty said after a night where he had played 24 minutes, yeah, well, it's just a one off. Well, since then, that was a game against Boston. He played,
right.
he had a career high, or actually a season high, for ice time at 5-on-5 in Columbus. He
Mm-hmm.
played almost 21 minutes against Washington, 20-27 against Toronto, and yesterday and on Wednesday, 23-52, so almost 24 minutes against Utah. So the the one off is quickly becoming a trend of using him north of 20 minutes, because
Yeah.
that's 5 games right there where you put a lot of pressure. And I understand that the team has been having difficulties, and you turn to your best players to bail you out. First and foremost, Nick Suzuki, and I mean, he had a great game in Utah, and he seems to have finally recovered from that block shot against
Yeah,
Philadelphia.
he
He
looks
seems to have
much better. Yes.
much better. So that's good, and you want to benefit from that. But at the same time, it shows the limitations of the roster, because it's one thing to turn to your best player to help you win, but you've got to be able to give them a break once in a while. And I mean, in Utah, Davidson did not play a single shift in the third period. Florian Jacquard played one.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you mentioned also Engstrom at 3 shifts on the back end in the third periods, and the list goes on like that. So it's and Mike Matheson's also been asked to play a ton. So at this point in the season, where it's still all so tight in the standings, but it's still only November, but already
Yeah,
the
almost December.
but the bench management, suggests that it's a race to the limit, and it's do or die every night. That's how it looks like. It's do or
Yeah.
die every night.
Well, I think that game Wednesday was a particular case of that, just because you didn't want the win on Saturday against the Leafs. You didn't want a re-slip, like you didn't want what happened against Utah 2 weeks ago in Montreal to happen again, where you have this really encouraging game and then all of a sudden you lose the next game and then you lose the game after that. And then next thing you know, you're right back in it. And so I can understand the urgency in Utah to close that game out. The interesting part of the bench management, just as an aside, one guy whose ice time was not cut at all was Oliver Kapanen.
Brendan.
Not only that,
Okay, I thought you were about to talk about Brendan Gallagher, but
no,
yeah,
well,
Oliver Kapanen. Yes.
Oliver Kapanen, a rookie,
Mm,
he was not kept on the bench at all and actually played his most minutes of any period in the game was in the third period. Played 5:08 in that
yeah.
third period. So, Demidov went a stretch where he didn't play and he only got one shift in the final 12 minutes of the game. But Kapanen is, we mentioned when Newhook went down and all these, and Doc went down particularly, like how Kapanen was going to have to lift, he's going to have a burden on him.
Yeah.
He's got it and he's handling it pretty impressively for a rookie. I mean, this is, it's not perfect, but one guy who has earned the coach's trust is that guy for sure.
Joe Veleno, to a lesser extent, seems to be carving himself a little niche these days. Talking about trying to lessen Nick Suzuki's ice time, especially on the PK. Veleno, is starting to get more reps on the PK. Crucial face-offs at times, so he's doing fairly well in that department. So it's no great shakes, and I think that the Canadiens could still use an upgrade in that particular position. But he doesn't look like a bubble player right now, in the sense like, well, he's not a top 12 forward. He plays the part of a fourth liner right now very decently. They could choose to spend some ammo on an upgrade, and we'll get to that a bit later. But I find it that still that game, since that game where he scored his first goal, there seems to be a bit more of a comfort level that's setting up, and maybe the fact of playing with Gallagher also, who's probably a stabilizing influence on any line that he plays with. It's good for him. So I mean, it's certainly not to the same level as Oliver Kapanen, who's clearly part of the long-term plans, just through the eyes of Martin Saint Louis. But I think it's bare mentioning, that Veleno, a guy that I was one of the first ones to just cross him off very early on in the season. He's holding his own.
Yeah, he had the most interesting third period, I think, of any player. He didn't play for the first almost 9 minutes in that game, in that third period. And then once the Canadiens got the lead, and then once Kapanen took that penalty for puck over the glass, that's when he got his first shift on that penalty kill. And from that point on, played a regular shift. And that's speaks to the role that he's carving out. He played the final 28 seconds of the game when the Canadiens were defending at 6-on-5.
That's it.
A serious point of vulnerability for them this season. And kudos to how they got out of it. And Jakub Dobeš on that 6-on-5 in particular, but in that third period was really, really good when he had to be. But Veleno, like as soon as it became a situation where they were just going to try to close the game out and protect that 1-goal lead, he became leaned on significantly, not massively, but he played, as opposed to the first 9 minutes of that period where he didn't play at all. He sat on the bench the whole time. So that's a good role for him to have. But, it's interesting. So, Davidson, no shifts in the third period. Jacky, 1 shift in the third period. Veleno, this kind of wonky usage. You have Alex Texier, who we'll see if he plays today or not, but he's going to play at some point. So like he's going to be in the mix for one of these roles. And now you have Samuel Blais, who is back in the fold. Obviously, he was sent to Laval after he was picked up on waivers yesterday. But I would have to imagine that when the team gets back to Montreal, he would probably be a candidate to come back up. You would think. I mean, this is why they wanted
Yeah.
him in Laval to begin with, is for a situation just like the one they're in right now, where they need veteran bodies to fill out the lineup because injuries have hit. So
Oh, they had
um,
six rookies against Utah. I mean, that's a lot. That's
exactly, but when three of them sit on the bench for the vast majority of the third period, that's not ideal, especially as we mentioned when you're about to enter this gauntlet of constant games. Um, you can't have that. Now, I don't know the extent to which Blais is going to be trustworthy in that situation, in a similar situation, or how trustworthy Texier is going to be in a similar situation. But these guys have some NHL chops to them. They've played NHL games, even though it's been a while for Blais since he's been an NHL regular, really. But um, I wonder how that's going to impact Marty's ability to close out games, because you can't. This is not sustainable the way he did it on Wednesday. Like, it's great that the Canadiens won, and I think the way that they closed out that third period was really good. Like, I mean, that was a really responsible, mature third period from them. Even though they needed Dobesh to bail them out a little bit. Um, do you see Texier and or Blais entering the mix changing that in any way, shape, or form? Like, does that actually change the calculus that goes on behind the bench in those situations for Martin St. Louis?
Well, the problem with Blais especially is that he's not necessarily hasn't proven to be really a penalty killer, but just 5 on 5. I would see him taking over Davidson's job and allowing Davidson to go down to Laval, play more.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it would benefit both the player and a team that is right now way too inexperienced. So if you are to give limited minutes to the fourth line, might as well give them to a guy who's used to not play a lot, who can handle, because there's players like role players and marginal players often talk about the difficulty of not playing a lot, and it's an apprenticeship in itself to sit on the bench for many minutes and be able, when once you're called, to go back out there and be helpful, not hurt your team, but be a plus on the ice. It's a skill in itself,
Like
for
what
when
Valeno
you're a
did.
support. Yeah,
Yeah.
and when you're a support player, you got to be able to do that. And it's tough for defensemen. I remember that last season, Arbor Jack, I talked about that. But I think this is something that Samuel Blair, where he's at in his career, he's able to handle that. Davidson, you don't even need to submit him to that if your plan ultimately is to play him so little. Might as well send him down. I think that he's, apart from that unnecessary penalty that he took, the extra 2 minutes, for the most part, when he's on the ice, I like what I see. It's a first
Mm-hmm.
call up. There'll be more. But for the time being, I would see Blais. But as for Texier, we discussed that in Monday's episode, but I just struggled to see a proper fit, especially since Florian Jacquet, who's also a candidate to be sent down, is is providing you with a presence that you need in your lineup. Whether
Yeah.
you play him a lot or not, he's got that ingredient that the Canadiens can really use right now. So until they go out and find a guy who can provide that and who's a more seasoned guy in the NHL. He's the skating, the grit. He really follows that line and it helps that line being better too. I like to see Florian Jacquet playing with Josh Anderson. It's there's a lot of oomph on that line.
There's a lot of jam for sure. But that sounds like you just had like one of your classic mag segue moments there. Because there is an avenue for the Canadiens to go out and do that, right? I mean, now it seems like we've been talking about sort of a trade window
Yeah.
emerging at some point. Um, we've been talking about that as early as the summertime, like where, and you brought up the excellent point of the double retention sort of deadline, which is coming up in December here.
Yeah.
Um, so there's that. There's the fact that the Canucks sent a memo out to all 31 other teams to say that our quote unquote veterans are available, leaving it, I think, intentionally vague, but suggesting that there are players that are heading towards unrestricted free agency and maybe some others, who knows. Um, they're
A veteran we just signed to a long-term contract.
yeah, right. Can I interest you in a Brock Besser, anyone? But yeah, but like that's a clear side. And Nashville's obviously in a position. Barry Trotz's profanity laced interview in the Tennessee Inn, like really kind of sort of airing of grievances in a big way with Barry Trotz.
Man, yeah.
Is an early Festivus sort of moment for him. But so they're clearly looking to do something, and whether or not Ryan O'Reilly is even available and whether he'd be interested in leaving there is up for debate. I think the Predators would be interested in moving him. It's just Ryan O'Reilly holds a lot of cards there, right? So, but there's other players there. I would, if Nashville's open for business, I would talk to them about Michael McCarron. Like honestly, like I don't see why not. Like if you want a big physical guy on your fourth line who can kill penalties, like Michael McCarron's turned into like a pretty nice player over there. Honestly, like, and he's gone through some stuff and some personal issues and everything, and he's come out the other side of it, and he's a professional NHL player. He's not spectacular. He's never going to be worthy of his first round pick status, but you know,
Yeah, but it was not a great draft year, and it was the end of the
it was
first
a very
round.
late first round pick. Yeah, but I think
Yeah.
he's turned into a very useful NHL player, and one that I think the Canadiens could make use of in the sense that you could trust him in a situation like the third period of Wednesday night's game,
Yeah, but
and
one of our subscribers, David Normand, or maybe it's David Norman. I'm sorry, but I think it's David Normand. Brought up a good question in the chat. He was wondering if Gortz and Kent, if they had known that Blais would end up in their backyard again, would they still have signed Alexandre Texier?
I
And if
think so.
so, if you have already brought back Blais and Texier, are you going to spend to find fourth liners again, like Michael
Well,
McCarron, for
Texier is not a
example?
fourth liner. That's the thing. Like Texier is not a guy
No, I know,
that you're. It's not a comparable here. Blais might be, but Blais is, you know, uh,
but he's
between
on. Yeah,
Blais,
yeah, but he's on your roster, you know.
yeah, and but
But when
it's
we, when I was talking about a guy who could be better than Villano, I guess for that role, Michael McCarron would be an upgrade over Villano.
I think so. He's
Teddy
been doing it
Bluger
for
in Vancouver, once comes back from his injury, would be an upgrade over Villano. You know, and
big
you could,
time,
yeah,
big time, and so yeah, I think it's just something that's worth, guys like that. Like you don't have to blow the bank now. I think all of this is going to be a huge philosophical sort of debate, and might already be in the Canadiens front office. When the Canucks send out that letter or that memo or however email, I guess it would be, but um,
facts.
facts, yeah, it would be great. It would be really on point if it were a fax, but I can't imagine like the Canadiens. This is the last year, well, for now, but you would imagine that this is the last year where they have extra draft picks.
Mm-hmm.
Next year, their drafts, they have all their own picks, but they don't have any extra ones. This year, they have the extra second from the Liney deal, an extra fourth from the Kovacevic deal, and so that's long been seen as trade currency. But when the well is running dry, whereas as of next year, they're probably in all likelihood going to have to start, you know, picking out of their own picks in terms of what they can trade away for draft picks. This is the last year they have the luxury of having extra trade commodities or trade assets. Um, so when my buddy Thomas Drance in Vancouver writes about Kiefer Sherwood and says, well, that would start with a second round pick. And I'm like, well, the Canadiens have 2 second round picks. Like, why would you not do that? Even though he's a rental, you would have months to assess him, and you would have months to potentially sign him to an extension if that interests you. Um, And if you're able to get Sherwood at a reasonable number, which at this point he's riding a massive shooting percentage heater and has scored a lot of goals, but still, this guy, when I looked up the NHL leaders in hits over the last 3 seasons, I had to like quadruple check that I did not write this wrong. But he has something like 790 hits in the last three
5 on 5.
seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's got more than 100 more than the
and the
second
next
guy.
then the next guy. It's unreal. It's like 4 or 5 a game on average for 3 years. Now the problem with Sherwood is that he misses games. He hasn't really, he doesn't play 82 games all that often. But man, like, I mean, you talk about a guy in a playoff series that you would like to have. Like, this guy is, and he actually played 78 last year. But this is like he's emerging at the age of 29, which is kind of unusual. But this is a guy that could be very useful to a team that has playoff aspirations. And if you're talking about a second round pick, and if these are all debates that I think the Canadiens have to have right now, because I think in an ideal world they would use that second round pick for a guy on with term, like for instance Blake Coleman, let's say.
Yeah.
Like that would be the ideal thing, or Ryan O'Reilly, who has another year left. Like, I mean, that would be the ideal thing. So, much like when we were talking about what do you do while you wait for Sidney Crosby to make whatever decision he's going to make, this is a similar thing. Like, what do you do when you have these trade assets and then suddenly there's guys available? They're maybe not the ideal person. They maybe don't fit the ideal mold, the ideal profile in terms of term left on their contract. Like, they're not Alex Carrier, right? Like, Alex Carrier was perfect in the sense that he fit a need. He had term left on his deal, so he helped them now and in the future. And how many times we heard Kent Hughes say those things? We want to do things that help us now and in the future. Well, at some point, and I don't know if they're there yet, this is the debate. At some point, you have to just do things that help you now, because the current season is worth something. The Canadiens are not going to win the Stanley Cup with or without Kiefer Sherwood and with or without Blake Coleman. So that's, I think, what comes into the math here. But now that players are starting to seemingly become available on the trade market, I think this is a debate that the Canadiens, if they're not having, need to have and need to figure out. Like, how do they approach their bank of assets, which are the picks and the prospects? How reticent are they going to be to use any of them for what amounts to a rental, if at all?
Yeah. Well, regarding the debate of short-term fix versus, long-term help, I think that one aspect is that the guy that can help you now, you should not just look at the guy in a vacuum, but the help that he will provide you this season, the help is all, he helps the rest of the team getting better, and the experience that the whole team gets, the help that he provides now helps the Canadiens in their chances of having maybe extended playoffs, or assures them of being in the playoffs. And that helps the whole team, the younger nucleus, helps them with their experience. So it's an investment for the future in itself, even though that guy,
Right.
that's not spare part, but that rental guy might just be here for a little bit, so, but there's always a risk to overpay, especially for a guy like Kiefer Sherwood. I mean, it's the neons are flashing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about the fact that he's got a crazy shooting percentage, the fact that he's a late bloomer. I mean, he's going to turn 31 at the end of March. So before the end of the regular season, he'll be 31. Um, he plays a very physical style, which at some point becomes very demanding on the body, and there's always that risk. Are we paying for the hits that he's already given, or the one that he's going to give in the
Yeah.
future? Now, on paper, if he was to remain who he is, because the shooting percentage of this year is one thing, obviously unsustainable, but last year he managed to score 19 goals in
Yeah.
78 games, and his shooting percentage was 13.5, which is a lot more believable.
Hmm.
So if you buy the Kiefer Sherwood from last year, man, and he remains like that for God knows how long, I'm willing to all day and every day. I mean, he plays on the PK. He provides you secondary scoring. He's going to add to the physicality of your team. Man, where do I sign? It's just that the risk of him falling off a cliff at some point is big, or that at some point he ceases to be effective, a la Tanner Janot, or
Yeah.
even worse, David Clarkson. You know,
Right.
so there's it's if you choose to sign a guy like that for his physical brand of hockey, I think that the age is a reminder. But if they choose to sign him or acquire him because of his goals, there's always a risk that he might come back to earth. So I'd
Well,
be very
yeah.
excited. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't. Well, I just don't. I don't think they would do that. It's the combination of the goals with the physical nature, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what's enticing about him. And the sample of last year, last year, 19 goals, 21 assists, 40 points in 78 games. That's fantastic. Like for a guy who hits everything that moves the way he does, that would be great. You're not getting a goal every 2 games the way he scored this year, but someone who gets you somewhere in the vicinity of 20 goals, even though he's never done that before, um, would be great. Now, the issue is if you're Kiefer Sherwood and it's taking you this long to kind of emerge, and then you hit free agency and you are this unique package that's highly sought after in the NHL. um,
Someone's going to overpay.
Someone's going to overpay, and you would be silly not to test that market, right? And see how much are people willing to pay. And because if you're Kiefer Sherwood, you should also realize that this could fall off a cliff at some point. And I am faced with a very, very unique opportunity here to get some insurance against that. If someone's willing to offer me a 5-year deal at 5 million, I don't know, I don't even know what it would be, but you got to see if it's out there, because it's hard to find. Like, I mean, the whole city had like a referendum on Tom Wilson again, because of what happened last week and because of obviously what happened in the playoffs last year. But just generally speaking, like this type of player, people hate him, but they would love to have him on their team. And I'm not comparing Sherwood to Wilson, but frankly, he's in that mold. He's obviously not as good as him, and he's not as big as him, and he's not as fearsome as him, but he fits that profile, and that profile is hard to find. Jeff Gorton was on overdrive with 1050 on Friday, and so it was the day after Tom Wilson took out Jake Evans, and so they asked, like, is Jake Evans okay, and what did you think of the hit and all this stuff, and then Frankie Corrado was like, is that something you think you need? And he's like, well, yeah, of course, we're all looking for that. It's just
Yeah,
hard to
yeah,
find. And
for
then
sure.
2 days after that interview, the Canucks send him a memo. Jeff Gorton receives a memo from the Canucks saying that our guys are available. And all of a sudden, there's this guy who is not Tom Wilson, but is like a decent facsimile of, he's a poor man's Tom Wilson. Like, he's a very, very poor man's Tom Wilson. And that's no disrespect to Kiefer Sherwood. It's
Well,
just
he's
that
much smaller.
that's how good Tom Wilson is. Yeah, he's much
Yeah,
smaller, but he's a battering ram. He
yeah.
he goes he goes out, and he has a mandate, and he has a mission, and he fulfills that mission. Like, there's no confusion with him of what he's sent out there to do. And so the Canadiens could use that element for sure, and they're not the only team. Like, that's the issue. Like, now there's so few sellers, because even though we've added, the Flames appear to be, even though, well, the Flames actually, who knows what they're thinking, because their president of hockey operations gave a huge interview saying we're not rebuilding, and we're not trading Kadri, and we're not doing this, we're not doing that, and set the fan base on fire in Calgary, because they're like, well, then what are we doing? This is not.
Excellent question.
Yes, exactly. But so you would think that at some point Calgary is going to come around and be like, okay, well, we got to do
Yeah,
something here. So you have Calgary, Vancouver, Nashville,
St. Louis probably.
and St. Louis, and
Yeah.
so and even St. Louis is going to be like sort of a retool situation. Like I can't see like we've talked about Braden Shen a lot. Braden Shen's an older guy. Like Braden Shen comes with some issues as well. Like he's not an ideal person, and in terms of age and he comes with a relatively somewhat hefty contract. Like you're not slotting Braden Shen in as your 2C and feeling good about it. I don't think.
Okay, let's talk about Ryan O'Reilly then, because I think that
Yeah.
this is a guy who, if he was, I think if he was faster, it would be a lot less of a debate. But there's also the aspect from his point of view, where even though he doesn't have the no trade clause, they act as though he's got one. So basically, he'll choose where he wants to go, or he'll give this the yay or the nay to any deal. But
Mm-hmm.
this is a guy who, he's been on either bad teams or teams that had bad playoff luck, but he's eager to win. And
He won the Conn
he,
Smythe Trophy.
yeah,
He was on the luck. He had the team with the most playoff luck in like the last 10 years. So
yeah. But I'm thinking of playing for Buffalo, playing for Toronto. He's had some disappointments. He plays now for Nashville, and they think that they're set up to be contenders, and they miss playoffs bigly. Last year
yes,
it'll be the same this year. There's no sunny ways coming up in Nashville anytime soon. So if he wants to win again, he's got to look at a destination where it's going to be enticing. And I wonder if the Canadiens are showing enough, not only to O'Reilly, but to other players in that situation. There are multiple players who have no trade clauses right now who might be available on the market. They might have put Montreal on their no trade list. They'd be invited to reconsider if a deal came to their boss and say, you know what, are you sure? I know that you put Montreal on your list, but do you cross it off or you maintain it? Uh, so Montreal has to present itself as an interesting destination, not only for now but for the future too. But when you're an older player like Ryan O'Reilly, it's got to make sense rather in the short term, because otherwise, in terms of fit, the fit is there.
the fit is there. The interest is there. The fit is there. I mean that would solve a lot of issues because Ryan O'Reilly was recently quoted saying, "I'm the first line center on this team, and I've only had one good year in my career, and this is garbage," and just kind of crapping all over himself. Right? I guess he made a turnover at some point in that game or whatever, but it's not the first time Ryan O'Reilly's done this. Like he seems like a guy. And the one good year in his career that he would obviously be referring to is 2019 when he won the Conn Smythe Trophy at 77 points in 82 games. But honestly, like you look at his body of work in his career, he's a remarkably consistent player. Like he
Yeah.
is a 50 to 60 point centerman, and he gets you that pretty much every year. Um, it's obviously he's getting older now. His first year in Nashville, 69 points in 82 games. He had 53 points in 79 games last year. Um, he doesn't have the trade protection. And the one thing I wonder about is when he went to Toronto at the deadline and he played in the playoffs for them, did okay, but 9 points in 11 games, but that environment didn't seem to appeal to him. Just the pressure of it all, and like just the media and just the scrutiny. And he seemed to suggest when he left, because I think they had interest in re-signing him, if I remember correctly, and he seemed to want to get out of there, for whatever reason. And I'm not saying Montreal is Toronto, but if the scrutiny and the pressure was the reason why he didn't like Toronto, then that's not going to be much better in Montreal.
No.
If it was the culture in Toronto or just the way that the vibes on the team and just how they performed in the playoffs, if that's the reason why he left Toronto, that's something else. That's different. But it's not the fact that he signed with Nashville would suggest that he was looking for a place where it was a little quieter. Like
Right.
it's not exactly the glaring spotlight of a hot hockey market. So coming to Montreal, while I think it would be exciting, it should be exciting for any hockey player who wants to compete and sees a young team that's on the verge of doing some good things, and the fit being so perfect, and knowing that you're going to play a second line center role. You're in all likelihood going to get to play with Demidov, perhaps even with Slavkovsky. Who knows? Like, I mean, there's interesting players that he could be playing with. But I just wonder if Barry Trotz sticks to what he said, and basically said that Ryan O'Reilly is going to be part of the decision making process, which is what he said last year. I don't know to what extent that remains true, but if it is true, then Ryan O'Reilly is going to have to want to go back to what would be a similar situation than he had in Toronto, and that he didn't seem to like.
Right. Well, there would be no shortage of teams where he would be a fit, and that it would be, in a position to acquire him.
Yeah.
Whether, I mean,
I mean,
Washington,
everyone's looking for a center. Yeah.
Washington, New Jersey, Minnesota, if they're buyers.
How long is Dubois out?
3 to 4 months.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right now, that job at the second line center is belongs to Justin Sourdif.
Justin Sourdif. Yeah, that's right. He's doing actually quite well.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Okay, so people say, well, why are they talking like that about Justin Sourdif? It's because we were watching, Arpin and I were at a Laval Rocket game during the playoffs, and the Rocket were playing the Charlotte Checkers. And I pointed out to Sourdif. I said, man, I like this guy. He's got speed and grit, and I like him. And well, sure enough, they spent a second round pick to acquire him.
Yeah, they paid a pretty good price to get him. Yeah,
but they saw something in this guy who was basically almost like he's borderline to a non prospect. He's like 24 now.
Yeah.
Anyway, but he's found a great spot for himself with Washington. But Ryan O'Reilly would be a better fit. And
yes.
So anyway, there are a number of teams. That's my point. And Ryan O'Reilly, because of the number of teams,
just to cement your point on Money Puck, among lines that have played at least 50 minutes at 5-on-5 together, the Protas Sourdif Wilson line is number 1 in the NHL in expected goals for percentage, 72.5%.
Yeah. Okay, it's probably
number
not
one.
all Sourdif.
Yeah, no, but he's there. That's his name. Is number 1 on the list. So
he's
it's
part
among 3 names. Yeah,
yeah,
he's there.
Yeah. So, but the scarcity of available sentiment plus the demand that remains sky high as ever. Mm-hmm. I think that it puts Nashville in a position to get a whole lot more for O'Reilly than probably what he's worth at this point in his career.
Well, Pierre Lebrun reported that it's a first-round pick and an A prospect. That's the asking price. Which is for sure you're going to put that out nuts. There. Well, of course it's nuts. That is nuts. And I've seen people in our market being like, yeah, I'd trade Reinbacher for him. I trade this guy. I trade that guy. It's just like, you get one more year of Ryan O'Reilly. His age 34 and 35 seasons. So you're getting 1.5 seasons of this guy. The notion of trading David Reinbacher to get this guy, it's ludicrous. Like, it's honestly, like, it just makes no sense. But I don't know what a prospect means. But if you were to trade any one of Hage, Girard, I think
is Engstrom an A prospect? It's all beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
I mean, I think, yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. I think he's verging. He's trending that way. But he's a bit of an older prospect at this point. He hasn't played. He's played one NHL game. and that's the 2022 draft. So it's only it's been 3 years.
No.
He's a defenseman. It'll take a while, but I think he's trending towards being an A prospect. I really
Okay.
do, because that's another position of scarcity in the league is puck moving defenseman who can play on the right, even though he's a left shot. He's very comfortable playing on the right side and is actually effective at it. It's but you're talking about Engstrom. Let's say it was Engstrom and a first for O'Reilly. Would you do that?
Probably not.
Me neither. I wouldn't
No.
either.
I would.
Even though O'Reilly would be the perfect fit for this team. Well,
Yeah.
perfect. The perfect fit that doesn't wear number 87, like basically, like so. It's yeah.
The thing is, it's not that I wouldn't want the Canadiens to part with their first round pick or with Adam Engstrom or with David Reinbacher for that matter. It's just that when you decide to move those pieces, it's got to pay off big time. It's got to be a great player coming back. You have to get better significantly or for a long time. And for sure, Ryan O'Reilly makes you a better team, but it would be for 15, 16 months.
Mm-hmm.
And and then maybe plus if he resigns, but it's no guarantee. Um, and once you commit to a trade like that, after that, you don't have any more powder to keep dry. You've wasted your trade assets into something. So you cannot turn around and say, okay, let's see what else is out there in terms of
And this brings
significant
us
impact players.
this brings us back to the whole philosophical debate that has to be going on in the front office. Like how much, because you can drive yourself crazy and basically make no trades if you're constantly thinking, is this player good enough to warrant using this asset? And you can twist yourself into knots just trying to imagine what else can we get with this, especially when you're talking about picks for the 2026 draft. Because eventually the 2026 draft is going to happen, and and those draft picks will either have to be traded or used, and
Yeah,
so there's a finite there's a deadline here, and so it's I find it fascinating because I know because they've said so publicly, and I know they feel this way. They're not in a position to go out and make a trade and bring in a player and think that they're suddenly a contending team, because they're not, and they won't be. Ryan O'Reilly will not make them a Stanley Cup contending team. I don't think they will win the Stanley Cup if they go get Ryan O'Reilly, and that shouldn't be that doesn't mean that that's the only bar that you should set as a team. You can't do every move with the view that, well, we're not going to do that because it's not as if we'll win the Stanley Cup if we do that. Like that, then you won't do anything. Like who would do anything?
no,
It's like it's so. But I agree with the point that you made when you were talking about even bringing in Sherwood, who's a rental. Like if the player that you acquire makes it more likely or more probable that you will not only play in the playoffs this year and next, but could actually advance in the playoffs around or whatever and get more playoff experience and start building on the brief appearance you made last spring, so that maybe this year you go 7 games in the first round, or you actually win the first round, and you see what it's like on this in the second round, and how the playoffs sort of evolve. There's value to that. Like I totally agree with what you said. Like that has to enter the equation of what are we spending this second round pick on, or in the case of O'Reilly, I guess the first round pick. What are we getting? And it doesn't limit itself to Ryan O'Reilly or whatever player they're talking about. It is also has to be added to that is, okay, if this player allows us to reach the playoffs and have some modicum of success in the playoffs, how is Nick Suzuki going to improve from that? How is Cole Caulfield? How is Demidov? How is this? How is that? How are all these guys going to benefit from that? And we should invest in
that's it.
that improvement.
Yeah,
So it's not only the player, it's what the player, and so then the math becomes, okay, well, does this player actually do that? Does this player actually allow us? Because like in Sherwood's case, right? Like Sherwood is like, if they get to the playoffs, he'd be extremely valuable. Once in the playoffs, a guy like Kiefer Sherwood, he's one of the famous Bergevin guys who get you to the playoffs and through the playoffs. Sherwood is a through the playoffs kind of guy.
Yeah.
O'Reilly is too, but O'Reilly would really help get you to the playoffs. Like that would really solidify their path to a playoff spot. And I think when you're doing your accounting of your assets, what's coming back, that has to be part of it.
But the one thing though about O'Reilly being signed just for one more year is that I'm sure that the Canadiens are wondering, where does Michael Hage fit in all this in terms of timeline and how high we can project him to play.
It seems like a perfect bridge to Michael Hage.
That's it.
Yeah.
So because that way you can have him play in the pros or even in Montreal next year in a secondary role. And even though
you can give him a whole season in Laval if you do that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And he might not be the second center in his first year. He likely would not be.
Yeah.
But by then, your other players who are now, your Demidovs, your Slav, Caulfield, Suzuki, now they're a lot more closer to their prime. And maybe that you can allow yourself to have a little of a step back if there's a transition year to go from O'Reilly to Hage, So it's not.
We also have to start considering the possibility of when Żurawski's going to come.
Mm-hmm.
He's got one more year on his contract, right? And so it's like but I think he has to be part of the discussion of when he comes, because he just keeps getting points in the KHL. I think he's got 18 points. Last check, I think he had 18 points in 22 games. Like it's getting harder and harder to ignore this guy.
Right. So, but anyway, I think that it's an interesting season that the Canadiens are entering in at this point. That window until Christmas, it's going to be fascinating. And we bring him coming back to Vancouver. Just the MO of Jim Rutherford is that he likes to make the first move.
Well, he sent that note like, you're going to have to act.
Yeah.
That note was a sign like we're ready to do something. Like, bring your best offers, because we're not going to wait around forever.
That's it.
Yeah. So it's I don't know. I don't know what other teams could consider entering this market. Buffalo has the same number of points as Vancouver as we speak right now. Toronto has one more point than Vancouver as we speak right now. But that, that doesn't mean they should all abandon ship or anything, but it's getting to a point where, as of this morning, as a Friday morning in the East, the Penguins with 27 points has the last playoff spot. The Canadiens have 27 points. The Flyers have 27 points. The Red Wings have 27 points. Columbus and New York have 26. Florida has 25, and then Toronto has 23. So
everybody's 4 points out of
but 4 points out of a playoff spot on U.S. Thanksgiving has often been a bit of a thing.
Yeah, a bit. Is it still a thing though? I mean, seriously, when you look at let's say Buffalo.
I don't think the 8 teams that are in at U.S. Thanksgiving is still a thing, but if you're 4 points out at U.S. Thanksgiving, it's a tough mountain to climb, especially when there's all the teams I just listed. You have to leapfrog all of them. So that's in Toronto's case, you're talking about 6 teams that stand between you and the last playoff spot. So you need all of them to fall as you rise. It's a tall order. It's tough.
I agree with you, but the point I wanted to make is that you look at the Buffalo Sabres, dead last in the conference, and their goal differential is still only -6, which is honestly not too bad. So to me, this is a column that I'm looking at. The plus minus, just the goal differential. Generally, you're in the green. You're good to go. You're in the red. You missed the playoffs. It's almost unmistakable from year to year. So -6, not too bad. You look at in the Western Conference now.
It's a lot of red. That's
a
a
lot of
lot of
red,
red.
a
Yeah.
lot of red. St. Louis -25, Nashville -26. So
Yeah.
it's yeah.
Edmonton
So, so
-18.
so that's yeah. I know they're a special case, but that's why I'm
Yes.
saying that it's that's why that's my little tiny caveat, because the Buffalo Sabres, last time I checked, remain the Buffalo Sabres. So
Mhm.
they'll have their day at some point. We'll say, okay, fine,
But
who
I
can
also,
we trade?
well, no, but that's it. But that's the reason I kind of bring this up is that I don't see Toronto going into sell mode anytime soon. I don't see Buffalo doing it. I don't see any team in the East doing it, frankly. And in the West, other than the teams that have already sort of signaled that they are, and Calgary is still denying that they are, the teams above Vancouver, like Winnipeg, Edmonton, San Jose, Chicago, like none of them are doing that. They're not
Yeah,
going to sell off pieces like these teams.
I know.
And like even if Chicago and San Jose drop off, which I think everyone anticipates they probably will at some point, but they're not going to kibosh the competitive juices that have started flowing through their organization. So it could be that the seller list is not going to grow that much anytime soon. And if these teams are willing to act now, this might be just a heightened window of opportunity where you have so few teams willing to deal out and you have a lot of teams looking to improve. You might have to accept the fact that it's a seller's market and you just have to pay the price that comes with being in a seller's market.
Yeah. Plus, the weeks leading up to the trade deadline will actually be on hiatus because of the Olympics. So an extra wrinkle that probably would encourage certain teams to move
The big
earlier
time
rather
added
than
the big
later.
time added wrinkle of that is the inevitable injuries that are going to happen at the Olympics, and that's going to change the dynamic of the trade deadline in a huge way. And
Yeah.
it's such a limited time between the return from the Olympics and the actual deadline that's going to be just a bonkers. That's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun like week and a half. But um,
Hey, at the beginning of the show, I teased two more topics that we can make like an abrupt an abrupt turn,
well,
because that was
I don't think it's abrupt for one of them. I think it's actually quite relevant for one of them. But the Reinbacher talk. I mean, like
yeah.
I've honestly heard several people on broadcast this opinion that David Reinbacher they would trade David Reinbacher in a Ryan O'Reilly deal like that. It's just bonkers to me. It just makes no sense
Yeah.
to me that you would do that. But I get it to some extent because it's been it's been 2.5 years, almost 3 years since he's been drafted, and it hasn't gone well since then. And it's normal to kind of lose patience and get frustrated and not see. So where is he at? You were Ed Laval.
Yeah. So he's doing better. One thing that I find interesting is that Pascal Vincent sat down with him and they watched clips of him in Switzerland prior to him being drafted in
Oh
order
yeah,
to understand why were you drafted fifth overall.
they did that
And
together.
actually, I'm not positive that they did, but actually, I know that Pascal did, but I'm not
Oh
sure if
okay.
they did it. No, actually, I'll take this back because I'm not positive on the fact that it was a common exercise. It's just that they spoke about, you know on the one hand, you had Pascal who said, I wanted to understand why he was drafted fifth overall,
Hmm.
and I understood, I saw it, and I came out of it wondering why he wasn't drafted fourth. And then speak to to David, who says, I was drafted fifth overall. So it's like, okay, you two basically it was a talking point. They may not have sat down in front of the screen to dissect those games, but it was clearly a talking point. A part probably of helping rebuild his confidence, which is great. The one thing though is that even though it's a limited sample and
Hmm.
it's always coming back from injuries and he comes back and the team's in a it's in the home stretch of the regular season, and then it's tough opponents in the playoffs and all. He hasn't. Pascal Vincent has not had like a long runway to evaluate him, but you hope that by now he would have seen glimpses of that guy, and he did not have to go back to prior to the draft to see in David Reinbacher a guy who was a
Clearly a
fifth.
top 5 talent. Yes.
That's it. So ideally, but I think that they're building towards that together, and recently it's been paying off. In his limited time since he came back, Reinbacher feels as though he's getting a lot more creative offensively,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean he had goals in 2 consecutive games, and that suggests that. But he used the word creative in the sense that he wants to make plays and he wants to join the rush a lot more, because the safe game, the defensive game, I think that he's in control of that. But if he can showcase the offensive aspect a little bit more, he'll feel more comfortable. But I asked him, I said, that version of you in back before you were drafted, how far away from it are you? And he said, I feel like I'm pretty far from it. I'm far from
He's
who
ahead.
David
He's far
Reinbacher.
ahead. He
No,
feels
no,
like he's far ahead.
no. He feels as though he's far from the idea of how good he can be. I've got ways to go before I can be as good as I hope to be.
Right.
So he
But
acknowledges
when he said
that
he's
there's a
far,
there's a road ahead, a long road ahead.
sure. But I just want to understand what he meant by that answer. Like when he said he's far away from that version of him, does he mean
Yeah.
that he's far behind that version of him, or that he's far ahead of that version of him? Like that he's grown since then, or that he's actually regressed? Like it's
No. Not that he's regressed. Of course
okay.
he's grown, but he says I can be way better, like way way better.
Of course,
That's what
yeah,
he said.
and
Yeah,
you would
he
hope so.
said I
So
know
this
that, and that's why I got drafted fifth overall.
so
So
this
all
is
this,
this is the third time he's played for Laval. The first time he played 11 games, which was the year he showed up at the end of the regular. No, actually, yeah, at the end of the regular
yeah,
season,
yeah,
and they just missed the playoffs. That was under JF Wool. Then he played 11 regular season games that year. Last year, after the injury, he played 10 regular season games at the end of the season. This year, he has just hit the 10 regular season game mark. So in his 3 regular seasons with Laval, he played 11 games, 10 games, 10 games. First 2 years, 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points in 11 games, 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points in 10 games. And then this year, he has 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points in 10 games. This is actually the most productive stretch that David Reinbacher has ever had at the AHL level.
yeah.
By 2 points. It's not much, but it's still, when you're dealing with 10 game samples, there's not a whole lot to deal with, right? And he had 6 points in 13 playoff games last year, but in terms of just the regular season, like this is the best he's been.
Yeah. That's it.
So
And he started the season late because of this hand injury.
yeah,
But
that's it.
regarding the production, I got a quote here. He says, "I know I'm not Cale Makar, and I don't need to put up points. I'm a guy who's defending and has a good two-way game, and I think that will bring success. If I have a guy like Engstrom, or maybe in the future Lane, or someone else next to me, he's doing that part, and I'm taking the job behind there. So I know what brings me up there." So basically,
I would not trade
he's
this guy. I would not trade
well,
this
you
guy.
certainly you would if you were to trade him now, you would probably trade him at his lowest value.
I just
You
wouldn't do it.
should
I
you
mean,
should wait to see what you really got in this guy before you do.
it would have to be a really special player coming back for me to really consider it.
Yeah.
Like a very special player. Like it's, it would take 87 basically. There's not a lot of guys that are going to be available in trades, and 87 is clearly not available in a trade right now. But there's not a lot of guys that are available in trades that I would even consider for a minute trading this guy. You have to know what you have to. You've invested a number 5 pick in him already. You have to know what you have there. You got to.
Yeah.
You can't because if that number 5 overall pick turns into Ryan O'Reilly plus another like first like or whatever, like that would just be that'd be a catastrophe. Like as good as Ryan O'Reilly is,
I know it's
this guy could be on the Canadiens blue line for the next 15 years.
yeah. Yeah. He
But
he mentioned as a comparable, he brought up the name of Brock Faber. I thought it was interesting. So
as a guy who took a few more years to get there,
no,
or
no, just as a
just as a playing
playing
style
style.
comparable,
Yeah.
well, Brock Faber's a hell of a player. I mean, I thought of all the players in the Four Nations last year, the guy who opened my eyes the most was Brock Faber.
Yeah.
The guy I knew the least about, who impressed me the most, was him. Because most of those guys you know pretty well, right? I mean, but Brock Faber, I thought I knew, but you saw him in that environment. I'm not saying and it's great that Reinbacher looks at him, and who knows if he'll ever be at that level, and maybe not. Who knows? But I just feel like you can't trade this guy, not yet. You got to wait. You got to wait and see what you have there because the toolkit is so enticing, and just the his ability to see the ice, his ability to make decisions in terms of what pass to make. And I hate repeating myself, but like everything we're seeing Noah Dobson do now, that's what this guy could maybe be. You don't know
Yeah.
that, but like the processing is very similar. The game processing is extremely similar in the sense that he wins a battle, heads up, he sees a forward, boom, it's on his stick, and it doesn't take long. And it's like when he's at the top of his game, that's what he does, and he could do that night after night after night, and not collect points, and not have me look at his hockey DB page and make some goofy comparison between 10-game samples in the AHL, because you could do that and contribute to offense and never get a point for it, but you're being a good offensive player. You're contributing to offense in that way, and that's what he has. Like he has that. It's just that he just needs runway. Like he just needs runway to show it. Like I'm convinced he has that.
Yeah. But he's not where I like the Dobson comparison is that both of them they're not really flashy guys, you know. They're not like Lane.
No, no, no.
So
Their game is predicated on efficiency and length,
yeah.
like
So
defensive length. Like it's
so if you're looking for fireworks when you watch David Reinbacher, you're unlikely to see them. Not a very often, but he's going to be effective. But I agree with you. He needs runaway. He needs to play because I think that he's pretty fed up with that whole process of being injured, and working crazy hard to come back, and
mhm.
then finding his rhythm once he's back, and then getting upset because he expects himself to be at a certain level, but because he's playing catch up hockey within the games and within
Yeah,
among his
within
peers.
his career. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not quite there. So he needs mileage,
Mm.
So anyway, I think people are quick to the new shiny toy, and obviously Engstrom has been healthy and he's been productive and he's been spectacular at times. He's earned the call up, and it's normal that it's Engstrom that's being called up and not Reinbacher.
Yeah.
The draft
100%.
ranking has the draft position has nothing to do with it, and it shouldn't work that way. But it's not. It doesn't have to be held against Reinbacher for that reason. Just leave him there for the time being. If there's an absolute need at some point, okay, call him up. But it needs just to get his game going, and I think that he's on a good path right now.
I think there are a lot of people who are still butthurt that they didn't take Mitchkov. I think
Yeah,
those people still exist. Oh, for sure. There's tons of them, and Reinbacher's gonna have to wear that. Unfortunately, through no fault of his own, he didn't make the decision to draft him. But I think there's a lot of people in the fan base who still feel that they should not have taken Reinbacher in that draft. That's why you get this lack of patience is a natural byproduct of that because Mitchkov is in the NHL and even though he's having some turbulent times this year, he's a productive player in the NHL and was a legitimate Calder Trophy candidate last year. Ryan Leonard is in the NHL. You're watching him play on a very strong team. And so it's easy to see these guys playing, contributing in the NHL and thinking, why don't we have one of these guys? Why do we have this guy? And it's normal. It's normal. It could be frustrating if you're a fan, but if David Reinbacher hits, he's going to be NHL teams win with guys like that. He helps NHL teams win. I'm not saying he's going to reach that stage, but the reason he was drafted and the reason why many other teams wanted to draft him in that range, like he was not getting past 6 in that draft. The Coyotes at the time took Simishev next, right? I mean, that was, if I'm not mistaken, he was the 6th pick in that draft. Yeah. And so I'm pretty sure the Coyotes were going to take Reinbacher if the Canadiens didn't. So it's like and the Canadiens were fielding calls for that pick, and the people calling were not calling so that they could take Michkov. They were calling so that they could take Reinbacher. That was the draft in Nashville. Obviously, Nashville wound up trading Askarov to San Jose, but he was being offered to everyone. He was being offered to San Jose for the number 4 pick that year, which wound up being Will Smith, but he was offered to Montreal for the number 5 pick. They said no.
Well, at times they could use a goalie this year, but that's another matter altogether. Dobesh has just played an encouraging game against Utah. We'll see how he fares on Saturday in Denver. Today it's going to be Montembeault in Vegas. We said we would talk about Bolduc, but let's leave it for some other time. We have plenty
we'll talk about it Monday. We'll be back soon.
That's it for sure.
Yeah, we'll be back
All
soon.
right.
But congratulations to Bolduc on a 3-point night in Utah.
Yes.
It was a good breakthrough moment for him, but yeah, we'll get deeper into that on our next episode.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. And for those of you who are listening to us from the United States, I hope you've digested well from all that Thanksgiving stuff. We don't get that in Canada. We barely celebrate it.
Definitely not in Quebec. No. It's definitely, even among Canadian provinces, the Canadian Thanksgiving is the least important in Quebec, for sure. It's not I always make a turkey on Thanksgiving, so. But Canadian Thanksgiving, the real Thanksgiving in October. Yeah. Yes.
All right, everybody. Talk to you again.